If you've been around in the Pokemon community, you've more than likely heard of a hardcore Nuzlocke, basically making this children's game into an RNG-based hellhole.
What did I say, Brayden? What did I say? Fuck!
So I jumped into that hole as well and experienced my first ever hardcore Nuzlocke. I'll also show the rules on screen because I'm too lazy to explain them all. Pause if you need to. And now that you understand, let's get into it. We start off by choosing our starter, the only one that makes sense, Finnegan, and name it Foxy. After that, Serena shows us how to catch Pokemon. Yeah, this part is really uneventful, let's just skip to the gym leader. I actually almost lose this fight despite this being a bug gym, but we eventually pulled it off. And if you're wondering why this only took me one attempt, super training, because it isn't broken at all. After a close call, we finally run into our first encounter, Ralts, named Vivi. And because of his gender, I have options of either Gardevoir or Gallade. We then beat up the professor who gives us choice of the 3 Kanto starters, and I choose my favorite, Charmander. But it's not a psychic type, so... On the next routes, we find ourselves in Abra, which I immediately evolve into Kadabra using Cheaty Rare Candies, Sumi, and Esper, Meditite, and Solrock, which I name Hawkins, Nami, Luffy, and Sunny. Insert fire-related joke later, we finally make it to Sludge City for the next gym. And it's no wonder Game Freak removed Super's training after Gen 6, it's way too broken for early game. On the following route, we find a Sigilyph named Poneglyph, which means I do have a Pokemon for Fly, but I was kinda hoping to find an Eevee instead so I can get an Espeon, because I just like it more. But beggars can't be choosers. We then run into Corina and her 2 good boys who challenge us to a battle, but the Sunny has no problem beating them with only Bulldoze. In Reflection Cave, I find a Chingling, the worst possible encounter I can get here. But that's not the worst of it, unfortunately. And... horrible but easily forgettable death aside, we finally have our first rival battle with Serena. For this battle now, she was fairly easy, but considering she'll have 2 dark types on her team eventually, she could be a tough opponent. Or she could be crippled very easily. After wiping the floor with her, we have to go up against Corina again with her fighting types, so you already know how this went. As for right now, this challenge is way too easy. Making our way to Kumrain City, we have another rival battle with Serena, but once again she proves no match against us. And then after that, we have our 4th gym battle with Ramos and his grass types. But Poneglyph is able to take out all 3 of his Pokemon very easily. Maybe next time I will use Super Train to make things a bit harder. After beating up the old man, I go back to Solage City to fish up a Staryu, since I thought it would be better than Slowbro. But apparently it can only be found in Pokemon X and not Y, so I just wasted my time. We then take on Team Flare in the Lumiose Badlands, and this is where I have to be careful not to pass the level cap considering the amount of Team Flare grunts I have to fight. Luckily, Breaks into Meditite and Slowpoke finally evolve into Delphox, Medicham, and Slowpoke. And to make sure I stayed under the level cap for the gym, I had the experience share turned off and had Hawkins handle the gym trainers until we got to Clement, the 5th gym leader. Out of all the gym leaders so far, Clement was definitely the one to make me think at least a little bit. I used Hawkins to take Emolga out without worrying, then I switched out into Delphox to take on his Magneton. I kept on using Mystical Fire until he stopped using potions to heal himself and eventually take Magneton down. Last was his Heliolisk, which I used Luffy to deal with him after he goes to Thunderbolt, but I had a light screen up just to deal with Force Palm for the win. Afterward, we move on to Route 14, where we meet up with the forgettable one and Serena for another rival battle. She still doesn't realize that I'm the superior trainer, but she's only lucky to make it this far. And to prove my point, I completely sweep her with Vivi by setting up calm minds and let the Cardinals ensue. Shauna also has a small min-like prices, but I don't really care. So instead, we went to this scary house to hear a scary story. But it was pretty mid, so how about this? If you thought that was scary, then you should see this gym battle. Valerie barely put up much of a fight. If anything, this battle was more time consuming than actually difficult. We now go on to tackle Team Flare in the Pokeball Factory. The grunts leading up to them admins were easy, and when we got to the admins, we had to team up with Serena, making them easier to defeat. The president then gives us a choice of 2 rewards for beating them. I take the better one while Serena gets the shitty one. Once we make it to Dundemil Town, I replace some of my Pokemon's moves by, once again, using cheating heart scales, and again, Sumi. I retaught Luffy Zen Headbutt and Ice Punch, Foxy Shadow Ball, Vivi Moonblast, and Lola Yawn. Afterward, we head to Frost Cavern to deal with Team Flare and beat them up again, with very low effort. Before we can challenge the 7th gym, we have another rival battle with Serena. I have Vivi once again annihilate her entire team. Sucks having 2 dark types. And as I said earlier, pushover. Now it's time to fight Olympia. To start off, I send out Foxy, who I give Spell Tag to boost Shadow Ball. But it barely doesn't take it out. Since I didn't feel like potion stalling, I went to Vivi while she heals. I set up enough Calm Minds to take out all 3 of her Pokemon, and yet again, another Gardevoir sweep. This trend continues as we now have to fight the big bad boss of Team Flare, Lysander. We had to fight him in total 3 times. The first round, I kind of beat him up with Vivi again though. I didn't even need to set up any Calm Minds either. The fights get slightly harder later though. While making it through Lysander Labs, we have to fight Admin Mabel. Her Houndoom was easy to defeat, but her Weavile almost gave me a tough time. Weavile has a base speed of 125. Even with the super training, I wasn't sure that Vivi would outspeed. It also has Night Slash on its moveset, which is Stab, has a high chance of getting a critical hit, and all my Pokemon, besides Medicham, are weak to it. So I swapped out into Lola, who's my most bulky Pokemon, to take a Night Slash, and then use Yawn to put it to sleep. Once it falls asleep, I swap back into Vivi, but on the next turn, Weavile wakes up, hits a Night Slash, but I don't get crit, and I finish it off with the Moonblast. I almost lost my best Pokemon in this fight. It was way too close. After getting out of hell, we have to hear the saddest anime backstory ever, and we have to fight Xerosic from destroying the planet. Then we have our second fight with Lysander. I lead off with Poneglyph this time to deal with both Moonshao and Pyroar. Then I use Vivi to win against his Honchkrow and Gyarados. And after he cosplays as Dr. Octopus, he wants to fight us one last time. I used the rare candies to set Vivi to level 56, so that way I can guarantee to take out his Mega Gyarados, who gets a base 130 special defense. And since I was at such a high level, I've been able to take out the rest of his team out with ease. After dealing with Team Flare once and for all, we have 3 more rival battles. The first one was against Shauna, who I just swept with Luffy with High Jump Kick and Ice Punch. And next is Tierna. I used Lola to take out his Talonflame, Poneglyph for his Roserade, and Vivi for his Crawdon. Last was Trevor. I take out his Raichu with Luffy, his Fortress was annoying to take out but I eventually did it with Foxy, and last was his Aerodactyl, in which I used Lola to take out with Surf. After all that's said and done, we have to take on the last gym leader Wolfric and his Ice types. Foxy has her time to shine now as she sweeps his entire team with Flamethrower. And with that being said, we now have all 8 gym badges. Now we're on Victory Road, where we have our final rival battle with Serena. And if you haven't gotten this trend with her yet, I don't know what to tell you. So with that out of the way, we make it to the Pokemon League, where we fight the Elite Four. The first member I fight is Malva. Against her Pyroar, I use Yawn to put it to sleep, while it goes for Hyper Voice. Once it falls asleep, I swap into Vivi, set up Calm Minds, and take out Pyroar along with Chandelure and Talonflame. Then I swap back into Lola to put Torkoal asleep, and eventually take it out with some Surfs. Second, we have Seabolt. Third, we have Drowsna. I easily take out Dralgy with Hawkins, and do over half damage on Altaria. But it puts me to sleep, so I swap into Lola and use Yawn. Once it falls asleep, I swap back out into Hawkins. After some sleep stalling, I wake up and start using Calm Minds. After enough setting up, I take out the rest of her team. Finally, we have Wickstrom. He was fairly easy since I taught Foxy Calm Mind as well. I used it to set up against his Clef team, and it was just another sweep from there. And with that, we beat the Elite Four. Now it's time to fight the Kalos champion Diantha, and I'm just going to show you the full fight here. Yep, it was that easy. But with that, we officially become the Pokemon champion and beaten the Pokemon Y Hardcore Nuzlocke with only Psychic types. Oh, and we also beat up this homeless man too.